you've got two very different topics there. What the Iranians are trying to do to shape the situation, what the Americans are trying to do. So first, Iran. Iran has no tools here. Hamas, they are always considered a disposable asset, and now it's been disposed of. So, they're done there. Hezbollah, they consider more of a long-term partner because they're Shia. Hamas is Sunni and Muslim, and so the Iranians have always publicly considered them apostates and worthy of destruction. Hezbollah is a little bit different because of the religious affiliation, but Hezbollah doesn't have the capacity to really put too much pressure on Israel. They can launch a lot of rockets, and I don't mean to suggest that's nothing, but they're not capable of a ground operation in a way that would really threaten northern Israel. In addition, they are a member of the government in Lebanon, and so they have other coalition partners that will act to restrain them if they decide they want to get too uppity, because Lebanon's a very fragile place, and the Israelis, in their current mood, would have no problem of sending some assassins in and just killing the entire government and turning Lebanon into a chaos-filled cesspool, which would not help Hezbollah at all, and Hezbollah knows that. So I find it unlikely that we'll see anything significant from that front. The Iranians do have assets on the ground in Syria as part of the civil war, but they're nowhere near the border zone. And the border zone also has a buffer zone populated by Druze who don't like the Iranian assets, and then you got the Golan, which is empty. So the capacity of Iranian assets in Syria are really a non-factor, and that's everything. So unless they want to lob some missiles, which everyone will notice and everyone will have an opinion on when you lob missiles over some countries to hit another country, which will achieve the opposite of anything Iran would like, I'm not too worried. If Iran is going to do something, they're going to do it against perceived American interests, not a perceived Israeli interest, because the Israeli interests are just out of reach. But honestly, now that the United States has pulled out of everywhere in the Middle East, I'm not sure where that would be anymore. And it certainly wouldn't be linked to Israel. So Iran is going to Iran, and we should expect more of that. But it honestly is not linked to Gaza. If they decide to do that, it'll be a broader conflict, which will have broader consequences for them. And they know that. Okay, United States. If you are going to get involved with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, an aircraft carrier battle group is the absolute worst tool for the job. You want ground forces, and aircraft battle groups don't have ground forces. Now, we do have the MEUs, and I think one is on its way to the area. They do house 3,000 to 5,000 Marines, and you could theoretically do an amphibious landing with them, but 3,000 to 5,000 Marines is not enough to patrol southern Lebanon on the border. And we have never, never, never put boots on the ground in Israel. This is an Israeli show. We will provide intelligence and to a degree equipment. But after that, it's all on them. The reason that the United States has been sending the firepower to the region, the reason why Biden went personally, is because we've been edging into a new era for the last 10 years where the United States simply doesn't have as much interest in maintaining stability in the rest of the world. But by putting Biden's feet on Israeli soil on the eve of a massive ground invasion that everyone thinks is going to be a humanitarian disaster, Biden is making it very clear that if you want any sort of meaningful relationship with the United States, Israel has to be a country that you get along with. And this was a message for the Saudis as much as anyone else. And I think that message was received loud and clear. What they do with it is, of course, up to their own politics. But you can't. Part of what made the Cold War alliance work is that the United States just sucked up all the details. We accepted product from everyone, kept our markets open to keep their economies going, and it was all about the Soviets. And so we were willing to partner with almost anyone if they had an anti-Soviet posture in their strategic policy. And that put us in bed with some very questionable characters up to including Mao Zedong himself. Now, we don't have one of those overarching strategic goals. And so if you want a partnership with the United States, it's not on your terms, it's on our terms. And that means there's certain countries that we've decided are part of our inner family. The United Kingdom, Australia, Singapore, Japan, now Israel. And you have to be okay with that. There's not going to be a lot of negotiating here because there aren't a lot of countries out there that we need. We patrolled the Persian Gulf for decades because the oil from that wasn't going to us, it was going to our allies that we needed to maintain the alliance against the Soviets. We don't care about that anymore. And that means everyone has to adjust their expectations and kind of tamp down their national egos. And I think the Biden trip was very, very successful at making that point. People forget that the Chinese and the Russians have long-standing border disputes, and the official Russian policy is to nuke China if they cross the border. People forget that the Russians and the Iranians have fought tooth and nail over the Caucasus, and the very existence of an independent Azerbaijan is one that Iran is pathologically opposed to. So they use one another, and they all, for various reasons, dislike the United States, of course. But that doesn't mean they're on the same side, and that's part of the weakness of that kind of tripartite relationship. As for the Iranians and the Chinese would sell the Iranians in a heartbeat if it meant a better relationship with Saudi Arabia, because it's just about the numbers for them. China is the world's largest importer of crude. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest exporter of crude. And Iran, on a good day, can only export about 1 million barrels a day. So, if you have to make a choice, that's an easy one for them. And no, there is not going to be a broader war. We've already gone through the immediate neighborhood. No one is interested or capable. As for a country like China, China can't deploy forces without assistance from the American Navy past Singapore. So the Chinese are a complete non-factor here, and the Russians are completely locked down in Ukraine. That doesn't mean there's no strategic movement. Obviously, there is. The Chinese siding so publicly with the Palestinians, for example, is going to really, really, really hurt them with Saudi Arabia in the long run. We're kind of seeing a breakdown in all things Chinese. The cult of personality has gotten in so deep that they're making horrific mistakes like this. And the Russians inciting so obviously and publicly with Hamas is something that's probably going to destroy the relationship with the Israelis over the long term, which is something that both sides have gone out of their way to maintain. The pathological nature of politics in Moscow and Beijing and its anti American feeling is forcing them to act almost like Bolivia, doing things that they think the Americans will hate no matter what it does to their own interests. And from my point of view, honestly, it's kind of entertaining. Most of the stabilization is from everyone rushing orders out of China for things that they think they might not be able to get in the future. So the growth, in my opinion, is real. Whether that number is real, of course, is a normal question about Chinese statistics. But I do think that this last quarter, they've actually have seen an uptick because everybody needs what they have. If you're like me and you think the United States needs to double the size of its industrial plant, China ideally was going to be part of that story because so much manufacturing has been offshored over the last 40 years. We can't do everything that we need by ourselves without at least some equipment from other places, and China is the biggest one of those places. Whether that's durable over a year-on-year basis is a whole other question. But for now, I think it is real. The housing situation it has gotten so bad. So the newest news from the Shanghai Academy of Sciences, which are kind of the wise men in their system. Basically, if you imagine the Federal Reserve, if they weren't in charge of monetary policy and it was just their job to kind of comment on statistics and economics, that would be the Shanghai Academy. They're the wise men in the room. They're now saying that not only has the country overcounted their population by over 100 million people, with all the missing millions under age 40, making their demographics beyond atrocious. Now, they're now estimating that there's enough housing units in the country to house an extra somewhere between 1.5 and 3 billion people, indicating a 1 to a 200% overbuild. You don't come back from that sort of misallocation. And the only way you can stave off catastrophic economic degradation in the short term is with some really sound policies that redirect a lot of resources. And Chairman Xi is so blind because he's destroyed all avenues of information transfer in the country, even within his own government, that I think we're going to be seeing a lot more drastic and mind-boggling breaks in the system, kind of like we have seen with foreign policy, like we've seen with the intelligence service, like we've seen with housing over the next several months. From my point of view, every day that China doesn't collapse is a gift because it gives the rest of us a chance to build for a post-China environment. But the Chinese just seem dead set on driving their system into a wall as quickly as possible. And I've gone from kind of this doomsayer, like, I'm going to outlive the Chinese system, which I still feel very confident of. So I'm very worried that we're looking at a degree of breakdown in just the next few years that is going to be, from our point of view, unprecedented. But from Chinese point of view, this happens every few generations and has for 3,000 years. When the Chinese systems break, everything breaks, and usually because of an over centralization of power, like we were now very obviously seeing today.